Spain versus Portugal, a common showdown between two neighbors on the Iberian Peninsula that have attracted a lot of foreign residents in recent years. But whilst both countries are similar in many ways, it's really important to look at the details because that can really make the difference and can be what either makes a move abroad to one of these countries successful or one that doesn't meet the expectations and allow you to build the life you were looking for. So in this video, I'll be going in detail on aspects of living in both Spain and Portugal, from tax, immigration, lifestyle, and working in both countries to help you understand which one might be best for you. Let's get right into it. So let's start by talking about the visa options in both countries. We'll start with Spain and we'll look at the two types of visas that the majority of non-EU nationals that move to Spain are arriving on, which are the non-lucrative visa, the NLV, and the digital nomad visa. Now, these are both strong options for freelancers and people who don't have the majority of their work tied to Spain and that they're earning from outside of Spain, as well as for, in the case of the non-lucrative visa, people who have, significant savings or enough passive income to support their life in Spain. I'll put the requirements briefly on the screen so you can see an overview. I've got more videos as well where we talk about that in more detail. What you do need to keep in mind with Spain, though, is that these requirements are quite strictly followed now and they're quite strictly enforced in the application process, with more documentation being needed to support different aspects of the non-lucrative visa, for example, proving that you're not working. And also, whilst the general requirements haven't really changed too much over past years, the general sense of strictness is always there, and there's always the possibility that could change in the future, especially considering that up until April last year, Spain had a golden visa, which was essentially cancelled. So one of those things to keep an eye on if you are going down one of these visa routes is to make sure that you fulfill the requirements properly. Now, Portugal also have equivalent visas to what Spain has. So they have the D8, the digital nomad visa, and the D7, which would be the passive income visa, the non-lucrative visa equivalent for Spain, essentially. And the difference here with Portugal is that there's a bit more flexibility as to what is and what isn't allowed on those visas, and also the income requirements are much lower on the D7 passive income visa than in Spain. So again, I'll put that on the screen. Of course, keep in mind though that one thing is the minimum requirements and another thing is what you really need to live in Portugal, which is something we'll talk about as we go further on in the video as well. Portugal does still have a golden visa today. However, property investments are no longer part of that route. It's either a donation or an investment. And again, I've got a video where I talk about that in more detail. And if anybody watching is looking to pursue citizenship in either of these countries, then these different residency permits have their different renewal terms. And at the 5-year mark of living in either Spain or Portugal is typically when you would become a permanent resident. If you're looking to pursue citizenship, in the case of Spain, the standard instance is 10 years for the majority of nationalities. It's shortened to 2 for nationals of Ibero-American countries. So a lot of Latin American countries and Portugal and Philippines also come under that 2-year timeline as well. Or if you're married to a Spanish citizen, in which case you wouldn't need either of these visa routes, you can apply for Spanish citizenship after 1 year of legal residence in Spain. In Portugal, you can currently apply for Portuguese citizenship after 5 years, but as I've talked about and as has been thrown around in the news a little bit as well, there was a proposal to essentially increase that to 10 years. At the time of recording, it is still 5 years, after which time you can apply for Portuguese citizenship. And Portugal does recognize dual citizenship. Spain only recognizes it in a number of cases. Also something to keep in mind. Now, of course, not everybody who moves to Spain or Portugal is an entrepreneur or has passive income and investments to live off. So there's a lot of people who may come for work opportunities. So what is it like to work in Spain and Portugal, and what kind of opportunities are there? Well, in Spain, the majority of opportunities tend to be in Madrid, where you've got a lot of multinational companies and their headquarters, or in Barcelona, where you've also got a handful of multinational companies, but you've also got a big startup and small medium business scene. Quite an international hub you have in Barcelona. There are a couple of other Spanish cities popping up like Valencia, where you've got a number of startups starting to emerge, but it's not quite at the level of Barcelona yet. So I'd say the majority of opportunities are in Madrid and Barcelona, and there seems to be quite a big talent pull towards Spain at the moment in terms of attracting international talent. So there are job opportunities that can be explored. Keep in mind though, if you are working for a local business or a business that is dependent on the Spanish economy, then do be prepared to expect lower salaries than what you would typically be used to in Northern Europe or North America, for example. In Portugal, the majority of professional opportunities are concentrated around Lisbon, and I'd say there's typically fewer opportunities than there are in Spain in terms of professional opportunities, as well as the lower salaries in Lisbon as well, is that the cost of living has just become so high, particularly in Lisbon, which can make it a quite challenging situation to be in. Before I came to Spain, this must have been 7 years ago now, I think, I actually was looking at an opportunity in Portugal, junior entry-level role at the time, and it just, the salary that was offered compared to what the cost of living would have been, which at that point still hadn't really increased, but for me, it just wasn't worth it at that point. And I think the most likely scenario now is that wage growth just hasn't kept up with the explosion of the cost of living that Lisbon in particular has seen. So in terms of work and professional opportunities, Spain is probably the clear winner here versus Portugal. Now, for those that are entrepreneurs or business owners and want to set up a company local, set up their own business and run things locally, how does that look like in both countries? Well, in Spain, if you're self-employed, you're known as an autónomo. And for those of you who've watched previous videos on the channel, you'll know that autónomos are facing significant challenges in Spain in general. There was one piece of good news that came out recently with regards to the VAT threshold that is supposed to be implemented soon. But the major challenges of being self-employed in Spain are that you do have quite a high social security contribution throughout the years. Granted, you get an €80 flat fee for the first year, possibly even extended one more year as well. But it's highly bureaucratic. In addition to the social security aspect, you've also got quite high income taxes as well as a self-employed person in Spain. There is the setting up a limited company route known as an SL in Spanish, but it does require a minimum of €3,000 initial capital to get started. You do get a reduced corporate tax rate of 15% for the first year. Again, can be possibly extended for another year before moving to the 25% standard rate. So if you are a self-employed person and you reach a point or you already have an established business that is doing good money and you want to bring it to Spain and run it through a limited company, that can be an option to take off some of the pressure potentially. But again, it's highly bureaucratic and it can be quite a costly structure to maintain as well. So you do have to look at the trade-offs there and see if that will be worth it. There is one special company structure in Spain that is not so well known though, known as the ZEC of the Canary Islands, the special Canary Islands zone essentially. And setting up a company there by meeting certain requirements in terms of local hiring and capital contribution, you can get a corporate tax rate as low as 4%. So really attractive, but there are a number of requirements that you need to meet to get that benefit. Now, if we look at Portugal, on the other hand, on paper, things generally look a little bit better. So the ordinary accounting approach that is needed if you go over a certain revenue threshold is also highly bureaucratic, but there is a more simplified route known as recibos verdes in Portuguese. And so if you're self-employed and under that simplified regime, it means that you're taxed on up to a maximum of 75% on your gross income. That's primarily for freelancers and consultants. And then there are a couple of lower rates as well for, food and beverage businesses or businesses that are selling physical products. That's even lower. So slightly lower taxation, and I believe it's slightly more simplistic from a bureaucratic perspective as well. And small to medium-sized enterprise get a reduced corporate tax rate of 15% on the first 50k of profit. So not necessarily easy in either country, but Portugal probably edges it here because of that simplified regime they have, also with the lower corporate tax rate for small to medium-sized businesses. Now let's look at taxation in both countries in more detail, starting with what the tax residency rules are. So they're broadly similar in both countries. Both countries will typically look at the day count over the tax year, which runs from January to December in both countries. And in the majority of cases, if you spend 183 days or more in either country, they would consider you a tax resident in normal circumstances. There are some additional criteria that they may look at as well, regardless of whether you meet that criteria. So in Portugal, for example, they will look at, do you maintain a habitual residence in Portugal? And if you do, that can be another determining factor in you being considered a tax resident. Spain, on the other hand, can potentially look at your habitual place of residence, but they tend to look more globally at where your center of vital interests is. So where is your income primarily sourced from? Where is your family living? Are they living with you? Do you have for example, spouse and children living in Spain whilst you're living somewhere else. Situations like this can result in someone being considered a Spanish tax resident, even if they're not physically present in Spain for 183 days in the tax year. In terms of general income tax, so both countries have a progressive scale starting at around 19%, going up to about 48-49% maximum rate in the majority of cases as you move up the income brackets. The one nuance that Spain has that Portugal doesn't is that Spain has this concept of autonomous communities. So 17 different autonomous regions of the country, and they have some input over local taxation. So the final tax rate that you pay in Madrid, for example, might be different than what you'd pay in Barcelona, in Andalusia, in the Canary Islands, for example, because of these autonomous tax brackets that also impact on the final tax rate that someone will pay. In terms of tax exemptions for new residents, both countries have their respective exemption regimes. So Portugal's is known as IFICI. It was formerly known as the NHR, and a lot of people benefited from that in its time. IFICI is essentially the revamped version, so it follows the same principle, which is essentially that you're taxed 20% flat on any Portuguese source of income, with foreign income, so income from outside of Portugal, exempt from Portuguese taxation when you're bringing it into the country. And new residents can benefit from that exemption for up to 10 years. Now, what's the difference between the old NHR and IFICI, the new version, is that the NHR broadly applied to everyone, whereas IFICI is much more restricted in terms of who can access it, and it's typically now only active professionals in innovative and research and development style activities. So it's really specific cases that can get this now. Spain's equivalent is known as the Beckham Law. Similar concept. So it's a 24% flat rate on Spanish source income up to 600,000 euros. Again, with income from outside of Spain being exempt from Spanish taxes. And that exemption is valid for the year that the person arrives in Spain, plus the following 5 tax years. Like Portugal. We have a guest. Bark Brandy. Now, the main kinds of people that can benefit from the Beckham Law are essentially managing directors or employees who've been transferred internationally to Spain. So these people can all get the exemption. There's a number of other cases as well, but again, quite specific. The point here being, whereas in the past, Portugal's NHR was clearly the more attractive option because regardless of their working or non-working status, could benefit from the NHR. Now, because of the restrictions of who can benefit from IFICI, the Beckham Law perhaps edges it in that sense because it applies to a broader group of professionals that is not restricted by the type of activity they're doing. So up to this point, we've talked about work, setting up a business, taxation, but as I alluded to slightly earlier as well, cost of living and the kind of life that you can expect when moving to Spain or Portugal can also sway the decision in one way or another, and of course is a big factor in deciding as well. Now, in terms of the lifestyle in Portugal, the majority of people that move there, I would say, are looking for some kind of lifestyle near the sea because of the geography of Portugal and because of where the major cities are. So Lisbon, obviously very near the sea, the Algarve right next to the sea, and very popular kind of retirement destination with a more chilled, laid-back vibe. Porto also near the sea as well. There's only maybe 1 or 2 cities in Portugal if you're, sitting inland somewhere like Coimbra or Braga, for example, where you maybe don't have that seaside lifestyle and you get more of a countryside vibe. And as I mentioned, in terms of cost of living as well, cost of living in Portugal has really gone up, particularly in Lisbon, to the point where rents in Lisbon, in some cases, are even more expensive than rents would be in Madrid. So you really got to have a clear budget and make sure that if you're moving to Portugal, that your finances stretch far enough to cover the lifestyle you want, and also that it's worth it for you as well. Like, can you get that same lifestyle in Spain for cheaper, or even somewhere else for cheaper as well? Now, Spain in terms of lifestyle, I feel is quite a bit more diverse than Portugal. Spain obviously has the sea. You got, Barcelona is near the sea, Malaga, a lot of cities in Andalusia, the Canary Islands as well. are all, kind of seaside vibes. But you've got parts of the country that have a more temperate climate, like Asturias or Galicia, for example. You've got big city living in Madrid as well, that's not near the sea and is right in the center of the country. You can go for the mountains, enjoy the countryside and hike and whatnot in Spain as well. So Spain, in my opinion, has something for everyone. And in terms of cost of living, obviously, cities like Madrid and Barcelona, you're looking at quite high rents and general cost of living in those cities. But you do have other parts of the country that are quite a bit cheaper in terms of cost of living as well. In any case, in Spain, if you're coming with, let's call it Northern European or North American money, you're going to find life considerably more affordable than you would back in your home country. So bringing all this together, what are the key takeaways? Because I don't feel that one country is better than the other. I feel that each country is more suited to different kinds of people. For example, Spain, I think, is very good for people who have comfortable passive income or good amount of retirement savings. For those who are not economically active, for those who are working and are able to get the Beckham Law, I think that's great. And also, if you're looking to prioritize work-life balance in Spain, then it can be a great place to come and work and just live your life as well. Portugal, on the other hand, I'd say if you don't meet the higher thresholds of savings or retirement income that Spain has, Portugal can be an option for you as well. I also think that if you're a freelancer, self-employed, or looking to set up a business, then Portugal is perhaps a bit more friendly, particularly in terms of getting started and getting set up. And so hopefully you can see that as we've gone through this video, whilst on the surface, Spain and Portugal do look very similar, when we've gone into all these details, it can really steer you one way or the other. There you go, guys. That's my take on Spain versus Portugal. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Leave a comment and let me know if you're thinking of moving to Spain or Portugal and what factors are influencing you in your decision. If you like this video and you want to see a couple more videos about life in Spain and Portugal, then be sure to check out these two videos here. Till next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.